Good evening and welcome to Peace Lutheran Church's Bible study tonight. We are so glad you're with us, and you can help us out a little bit too by liking and sharing this Bible study. Now tonight we are on Hosea chapter 9, and it looks like we're going to do a lot. It's actually not that much. Hosea chapter 9 through chapter 11.
Does Sandy
Now, all of the Bible study information you need was emailed out to you. It was emailed out through a Gmail, but you can also find it two other places. One, directly below me on this Facebook post, but also right behind me on the screen. So you can find it in those locations. You're going to need a Bible. Now, all the location, or all the text up on the screen is going to come from this location, EHV, but whatever version you have at home, feel free to use that. If you want to follow along with whatever is on the screen, you can look right on the screen, or Bible Gateway has that available for free, so you can find the Evangelical Heritage version there. Grab yourself a drink to stay awake, but hopefully the folks in studio will be just as entertaining. And we hope that you enjoyed tonight's Bible study. Again, like and share, and also feel free to comment. Andrea here is going to read off your comments, and I'll hopefully be able to answer your questions and live in real time. All right?
Yep, you're training your people well. You already have 3 people say hello.
Hey, look at that. Who said hello so far?
4. Flo, Jolie, Marilyn, Patricia.
Well, there you go.
Hi, Pat.
And then there's a bunch of other people watching.
And even more people are watching. So you guys like and share, say hello, and we'll say hello back.
Heidi's watching, so there could be a lot of people.
Oh, there you go. Heidi's watching. Hi, Heidi. We're all praying for Ken. Say hello to Ken for us. Interestingly, I've got a little bit of bad news. The Freeman family is thinking about getting rid of our cats.
No.
Mom and I have been talking about it for a long time. We have a feeling that they're all communists. Well, all they do is walk around and talk about Mao. 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 Like the Chinese dictator.
I just wondered where you're going to work that in.
Yeah, see? Come on, this is America. No, interestingly though, did you know that Christians are more likely, in a recent study, Christians are more likely to own cats than atheists? Did you know that?
Because it's hard to own an atheist?
You can't own an atheist. So
You what?
You can't own an atheist. So of course we're going to own cats more than atheists. See, you guys.
I knew. Yeah.
All right, let's get started. I thought it
I
was
figured it out.
All right. Let's get started. So we're going to look at the Bible study. Look at the very top. She just got it. See, it was a delayed reaction. All right.
She's not laughing though.
I'm still laughing.
After class, you can explain it to me.
All right. That'll be gone by then. All right, let's take a look. All right, in Hosea 9, chapter 10 through 11:11, Hosea uses 4 images to remind Israel of their relationship with the Lord in earlier times. Now, I want you to do something. I've got it highlighted up there. Circle that word 4 images. And this is kind of interesting because Hosea becomes the book that is known as the book of similes. Now, of all of the other books in the Bible, this is the book that is the book of similes. What's a simile? It's a comparison book, right? Or you will be like, right? So you're going to hear that a lot in this section. They will be like. And so look for the pictures that Hosea is really drawing, or the images that he's using here. So let's continue on. God's people were once like grapes in the wilderness. Do you see it there? Like grapes in the wilderness. They were fruitful and flourishing. Here's another one. They were also like a luxuriant vine. An image meant to remind Israel that they had once prospered under the Lord. At one time, Israel, here's another one, was like a trained calf. They willingly obeyed God. Finally, through the image of a toddler, so, Israel's like a toddler, Hosea reminds them of God's fatherly care. But because Israel has rejected all of that, unavoidable consequences were coming. In Hosea 9:10 through 11, God reminds his people of the covenant blessings that they have abandoned in favor of idols. And now, that's the 4 pictures that we're going to look at tonight. It comes over these few chapters. And so let's jump right in to 9:10 through 17. Now, you'll remember last week we looked at the first 10 or 9 verses. So let's jump into 10 through 17. Would somebody be willing to read for us these 7 verses here? Go ahead.
I regarded Israel like grapes found in the wilderness. I regarded your forefathers like the first ripe fruit on a fig tree in its first season. But they went to Baal Peor, and they devoted themselves to a shameful thing, and they became as disgusting as the thing they loved. Ephraim's glory will fly away like a bird. No birth, no pregnancy, no conception. Even if they bring up their children, I will deprive them of each one. Yes, woe to them when I depart from them. I have seen Ephraim planted in a pleasant place like Tyre, but Ephraim will bring its children out to the executioner. Give to them, Lord, but what will you give? Give them a miscarrying womb and dry breasts. Because of all their evils in Gilgal, I hated them there. Because of their evil deeds, I will drive them out of my house. I will love them no more. All their officials are rebels. Ephraim has been struck down. Their root has dried up. They will bear no fruit. Even if they give birth, I will put their precious offspring to death. My God will reject them, because they have not obeyed him. They will be wanderers among the nations.
All right. So we have this section here, and the first question says, like grapes in the wilderness, I found Israel. This section reflects an earlier time in Israel's covenantal relationship with the Lord. So a good time when they were with the Lord, right? What contrast is presented in this image? What do you think it is meant to convey? So what's the contrast that is put there? That he's like grapes in the wilderness. I found Israel.
That they were growing wild, or that they were wild? I don't know.
Not wild yet. Think about it. This is early on in the relationship. What was the idea of the covenantal promise when they first started out with God and they were first his people, and God had said, "You are going to be my people."
They were fruitful.
They were fruitful.
Ah.
Yeah. God said, "This is going to go well, and you're coming into the land of honey," and they get to this land and they listen, and things are going really well at first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an idea. Now if you look here, this is kind of an interesting thing the Lutheran Study Bible says. It's like grapes, your fathers, right? The Lord likens himself, and I like this, a traveler in the wilderness who unexpectedly finds the vineyard. Such was his initial pleasure in the first Israelites. But the feeling changed as Israel became more apostate. What does that word apostate mean? You might hear that get thrown around. What does that mean when someone becomes apostate?
Does it mean going against something?
Yeah, when they become against God. So the more that they become against God, they were once blessed. They were like grapes in this wonderful, fruitful vineyard. And the more that they become apostate to God, the more they go away from God, what's going to happen to this vineyard?
It's going to dry up.
It's going to dry up. Now, this is interesting because I've never actually seen a good vineyard. I mean, I guess I'm not a wine drinker. But one of the things that I do know is down in Florida, you see a lot of orange groves. Have you guys ever seen orange groves? So if you've ever seen an orange grove, it's kind of interesting. When I was down in Vero Beach or Orlando or these kinds of places, you see a lot of orange groves. And if you've ever seen one in full bloom, it's beautiful and it smells absolutely amazing. And you see the farmers, and they're out there working. I mean, it's just something to see, and it's beautiful. But when all of a sudden just a little bit of fungus gets on these trees, there's no way to fix it.
They can't spray it.
They can't spray it.
You gotta cut them down and burn them.
Yeah, they actually have to grind them all the way to the stump and burn them right out. And it's so expensive that a lot of times when that happens, a lot of the farmers just go, we're done. They'll just throw up their hands and say, we're done, because it's so expensive, because you can't just plant a full-grown tree and say, next year I'll have oranges.
Yeah,
Right?
It's gonna take a while.
It's going to take a long time to regrow that orchard. Well, in the same way, think about what's going on here in this section, right?
I got a good quote.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Jolie says, so they went from sweet to sour grapes.
Ooh, I like it. Sweet and sour grapes.
Well, they were like wild grapes, but the Lord came and he was the gardener that pruned them and shaped them to be a good plant or good vine.
Yeah, I like that. And we're going to talk about, well, if God is the gardener, how all of a sudden did they get wily again?
Because they disobeyed God.
Yeah, and what happens, and that's what we're going to see in this next section, because something happens that makes them go crazy, right? And that's what we're going to see here. Look at question number 2. It says, now we recognize this in the reading. Notice these questions have a little bit of the readings mixed in with them. And verse 9, or verse 10, it says, but they came to Baal Peor. Despite the incomparable blessings of the living covenant with the Lord, Israel repeatedly turned away from God to idols, especially in the fertility god Baal. Here, Hosea refers to a specific occasion of spiritual idolatry that occurred in Peor. Now, we know that Israel continually returns away. It doesn't take them long, right? They're coming out of Egypt, and we talked about this before. What do they immediately do coming out of Egypt?
Golden calf.
Golden calf. But it's not the only time it happens. Now, if you have a Bible, go ahead and flip it open. We're going to look at Numbers chapter 25, verses 1 through 5. If you're at home, flip there. I'm going to, Numbers chapter 25.
Hosea?
Numbers.
Numbers.
And we're going to look, I'm going to put it up on the screen here. And here it is. Now, Fiona, do you want to jump up by the camera here and you read this for us?
While Israel stayed in Shittim, the people started to commit sexual immorality with the women of Moab. The women invited the people to the sacrifices for their gods. The people ate and bowed down to their gods. The Israelites attached themselves to the Baal of Peor. The Lord's anger burned against Israel. The Lord said to Moses, "Take all the heads of the people and impale them before the Lord in broad daylight, so that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel." Moses said to the judges of Israel, "Each of you must kill any of his men who have attached themselves to the Baal of Peor."
All right. Now, that's a pretty crazy story. Now, if we know anything, go back for just a second. Let's look at this, and you'll also notice it's also a little bit over on the side. If you look over on the side of your Bible study, we get a little bit about the local deities. Do you see that? Sandy, do you think you could read that little box over there where it says about local deities?
About the local deities, Baal Peor, or Baal of Peor, was a local deity worshipped by the Moabites.
All right, we're going to stop there. Ruth was a Moabite.
Mm-hmm.
So remember that too. Ruth, this would have been a god worshipped by the people of Ruth at this time.
When the Israelites, following Moses to the promised land, were in the vicinity of Peor, some of them fell into idolatry and worshipped Baal Peor. The story of Baal Peor starts when Balak, the king of the Moabites, hired Balaam, the prophet for hire, to curse Israel.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're familiar with this idea that all of a sudden, here comes the people of Israel again, and what coerced them into idolatry? It's a common theme through Hosea.
They were worshiping false gods.
They were worshiping false gods, specifically Baal.
They gave themselves over to the false gods, and then they identified themselves with the false gods.
And what specifically, according to Numbers, was the driving point here?
It was the woman.
Sexual immorality.
Sexual
Yes, that's right.
immorality. That was the bait that Satan used, right? That was the thing that made them go, hey, I can get into this, right? That was the hook, right? And so if you look here, it says, what tempted the people away from the Lord in this incident? Click ahead. Yeah, look right here. The people started to commit sexual immorality with the women of Moab. And then it says, like you said, Tim, and they committed sacrifices to their gods. We also see this with Solomon, right? That's what got Solomon to fall away. That's what got the people in Noah's time, or not Noah's time, the Sethites to fall away in Genesis chapter 6, right? So we see this time and time again, kind of being what draws us away, right? The devil doesn't invent a lot of new tricks. He uses timed, age-old tactics that he knows works, right? He figures out the thing that works. All right, so then we look at this one. It says, what does Hosea 9 then add? Oh, I thought this was interesting too. Look at this. In Numbers 25, this is from the ESV version. It's slightly different than our translation, but it ties really well in with our Hosea study. Go back to Hosea chapter 1, verses chapter 1 to chapter 3. Israel lived in Shittim. The people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. Right? And as you read through the words here, in the ESV version, and also the King James version, it talks about the people committing whoredom with the people of Moab. Now, how is that similar to the language used in Hosea there? When we're talking about idolatry, not just simply adultery.
They attached themselves.
Yeah. So remember, there's this connection to this idea that when you commit spiritual idolatry, you're committing spiritual adultery. Remember that?
Oh, okay.
And so this is the idea that if all of a sudden you go church after church after church after church, what are you really doing? If you're saying all gods are the same, you're becoming a spiritual philanderer. Okay?
Okay, got it.
All right. So if you take a look, this is from the Lutheran Study Bible. I thought this was good. It says, Scripture does not mince words in describing the unfaithfulness to God. Idolatry here and elsewhere is branded as harlotry. So the big thing is idolatry is branded as harlotry. Right?
Lusting after false gods.
Yep. And also, you think about that in the way we view fellowship, right? We want pure doctrine. And so if we are mincing ourselves with people that believe all other kinds of things, like if we are saying we are no different than the people down the street or over here that say all things are permissible, right? But we all believe in the same God, right? Let's join our churches together and have one great big spiritual hug.
Get the fuzzies.
Right? Because that feels good. Well, so does adultery. But that doesn't make it right. So feelings don't always equate out to right and wrong. So that would be spiritual adultery. So any questions on that? Any thoughts? All right, question number 3. Let's go to question number 3. It says, idolatry affects not only idol worshippers, but also subsequent generations, which is made clear in this section. Forsaking God to worship Baal will result in eventual demise of the people. How does this inevitable outcome expose the irony of Baal worship? So let's break this down just a little bit. Idolatry affects not only idol worshippers, that means like if I and Andrea all of a sudden decide we're going to become idol worshippers, we're going to worship another god. This says it's not only going to affect her and I, but it's going to affect our children and their children and their potentially their children. How does that kind of show irony if we're worshiping Baal? What's the purpose of worshiping Baal in their eyes? What the purpose of worshiping Baal? What were they overly concerned with? What did he bless them with? Do you remember?
It's fertility.
It was fertility.
Ah.
But then they were also sacrificing their children.
They were also
That's
sacrificing.
why they had to
I
have a
know.
lot of kids.
So if they're sacrificing their children, or if the idea of Baal worship is fertility, and God will give you fertility,
Fertility, yeah.
right? But Baal is also having you sacrifice your children. You're not actually getting anything from this false idol, are you?
No.
And if it's affecting multiple generations and their generations are going to do it, why are your other generations? Why would my grandchildren potentially be affected by my idol worship? What am I passing down to my grandchildren? Potentially.
Curse.
How so?
Because they'll be separated from God.
'Cause
Also,
where are they going to hear the truth
Is it
from?
monkey see, monkey do?
Essentially, yeah. Because essentially that's what I'm passing on. If teach a child in the way they should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it, right? If I never get up and I never go to church, what's my children learning from me?
You don't need to go to church.
Because it's not important, right? All right, so let's look at some things here. This is from Deuteronomy 5:9. Would somebody like to read that?
Do not bow down to them or be subservient to them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. I follow up on the guilt of the fathers with their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren, if they also hate me.
So this that idea that kids will do what their parents do, and God's going to not just say, well, you learned it from your mom and dad, right? It's not your fault. And this is kind of interesting too. This is from Eichmann. It says, even in the last decades of Israel's national life, the Lord is permitting the nation to enjoy a measure of prosperity. Remember that during this time, Israel is having good fertility. They're having harvest parties, right? That tells us that they're being blessed. God is giving them good grain harvest. God's people enjoyed a favorable place like a powerful Tyre on the coast of Phoenicia. Yet people attribute their prosperity to Baal and Astaroth, giving the best they have to the Canaanite fertility deities. They even sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. Remember that powerful image I showed you a while back where it was the big stone god and the children were being thrown into a fiery furnace? So they were hoping that it would give them fertility, and yet what were they doing with the outcome? Throwing it away. Right? Immediately.
there's an interesting thing to this. When they sacrificed their children, which child was it?
I don't know about that. I don't know if it was an older child or if it was just a child. I would have to look up on that.
It would be almost like off the get-go, you sacrifice the first child, therefore it will give you more children down the road.
Yeah, I would have to look that up. Or was it like the farmers? You sacrifice the runt. I don't know. what was it? in Andrea's family, no, I guess it wasn't. We had a Catholic family down the road from us that the 10th child was donated to the church.
Oh,
For real?
What I mean by that is the 10th child became the priest. The 10th child became the nun. That was the one that was the...
So it wasn't a choice of the child, it was a choice of the
Yeah,
parents.
that was the one that was the... And I know that I've met other Catholics that said the same thing. So,
some are living today
but-
that were designated to be priests.
so I'll look at, that's an interesting question. Write that one down. I'll research that one out. And I'll bring that back next
In your
week.
spare time?
Yeah, we'll look that one up. All right, we're going to move on then. And now we're going to look at Hosea chapter 10. Now, this is a larger chunk. This is verses 1 through 10. Maybe we can break it into two sections, verses 1 through 5 and 5 through 10. Would somebody be willing to read verses 1 through 5?
Israel was a spreading vine. He produced fruit for himself. The more fruit he produced, the more altars he made. The richer the land became, the richer he made his sacred memorial stones. Their hearts are insincere, so now they will suffer for their guilt. The Lord will break down their altars and destroy their sacred memorial stones. Certainly now they will say, we have no king because we did not fear the Lord. But what could such a king do for us anyway? They speak empty words. With empty oaths they make agreements. That is why disputes sprout like poisonous weeds in the furrows of a field. The inhabitants of Samaria will be terrified because the calf of Beth-aven, yes, its people will mourn over it, and its idolatrous priests will cry out over its lost glory, because it has gone into exile. It will be carried to Israel as a tribute to the great king. Ephraim will be gripped with shame, and Israel will be shamed of its own idol. Samaria, like her king, will be carried off like a twig on the surface of the water. The high places of heaven. The sin of Israel will become unusable. Thorns and thistles will grow on their altars. They will say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. Israel, you have sinned ever since the days of
Gibeah.
Okay, where the evildoers took their stand. The war against the evildoers caught up with them in Gibeah. Did it not? When I see fit, I will discipline them. Peoples will be gathered against them to bind them from their double guilt.
All right. Now we're going to look at question number 4. Now there were some interesting things. Let's go back real quick, all the way back to the beginning. All right. Israel was a spreading vine. Now, what do you think that's a picture of? A vine that's spreading.
It's healthy,
It's healthy.
growing.
It's
taking
growing.
over.
It's taking over. Yeah, so it's a picture of wealth and a picture of there's a picture of growth, real good things going on there. He produced fruit for himself. Fruit, right? Picture of a growing vine. The more fruit he produced, the more altars he made. Now we start getting to the negative things, right? Keep that in mind. Because I want you to think about this. When people are successful, it doesn't always work this way, but when people have lots of success, like Nebuchadnezzar, even if they know the truth, what is the great temptation for people?
Do what
I
they
did
want.
this.
I
did it
did this.
myself. Look at me.
Look at me. And what do they sometimes stop doing?
Giving God the credit.
Giving God the credit. And so there's an accusation there that God has just made. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And he even told them where the root of the problem is there. So keep that in mind, because that comes up at the end of the Bible study. All right? We're going to get back to that. But I want you to keep that picture in your mind. The spreading root being very successful, and then God saying, But with all your wealth that I blessed you with, what did you do with this wealth? You built more altars to bring me shame. Not to me, to other people. So keep that in mind.
We're getting to Jolie's point, I think, but she said, just like Saul, God made him king, then he turned his back on God.
Yeah, there you go. All to bring him. Yeah, that's a good picture, Jolie. All right, so now we have question number 4, right?
Yep.
All right. Israel is a luxuriant vine, a vine that's spreading and yielding fruit. Hosea uses this image, that of a fruitful vine, to remind Israel of better days. Right? Now we have this from Psalm 80. Andrew, you want to read that one?
You brought a vine out of Egypt, you drove out the nations and you planted it. You cleared a place for it, and it took root and filled the land. The mountains were covered by its shade, the cedars of God with its branches. It sent out its boughs to the sea, its shoots as far as the river.
All right, so they've got this picture of it all coming out and coming together and God blessing it. And then it says, their abandonment of the Lord coincided with prosperity, a connection also made in the book of Jeremiah. Listen what Jeremiah writes. It's up on the screen. It says, I spoke to you in your prosperity, but you said, I will not listen. In what ways could prosperity? Thank you.
Prosperity.
Thank you. What she said. Conditions test one's faithfulness in the Lord.
Well, thinking you're doing it.
Okay.
And not giving credit to the Lord for providing the situation for you to do it.
Scripture says, if I become wealthy, then I will say, who is the Lord my God?
Yeah. If I become wealthy. Now, it's not wrong to be wealthy, right? There's this great story that I tell sometimes about this guy that was, I don't know if it was Harvard or Yale, but he was a lawyer, or was trained at that college, and they sent a bunch of lawyers over to his house, and they were trying to get people to be recruited for the law school. And they sent him over to this guy's house, and he had owned this huge house. And the point was to send to this guy who is now a successful alumnus from this college, and he was supposed to wow them with how wealthy he was, right? Mm-hmm. And give him a tour of his house and of his law firm, and show what a great job he had done because he had graduated from this law school. And as he walked through their house, right, he said, do you like my house? And the kids, that he's walking through, these potential grad students said, yeah. And he goes, do you like my law firm? And they said, yeah. And he took them out to his car bay, and he said, do you like my cars? And he said, yeah. And then he took them up to the balcony of his house, where overlooking their pool. And he goes, do you like my pool? And then he said, yeah. And he goes, do you know how I got it all? And he said, yeah, tell us. And he said, well, it wasn't because I was a really good lawyer. It wasn't because I went to the law school that I'm supposed to tell you you're supposed to go to. It was all because God blessed me with it. And they said it was the last time he was asked to give that tour. but you see, that's kind of, wealth isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's the pride that sometimes goes with the wealth later on, right? And so don't get confused that having money is wrong, because having money is not wrong. It's that sometimes our ego, our pride of being a sinful person can take that and say, I did that, as opposed to God blessed me with this, right? And so keep that in mind. And one way we can definitely see this is this. This is a study from the Oxford University Journal of Sociology and Religion. The study found that the church actually grew in countries where Christians are persecuted. Okay, that's a quote. This is the second part, and this is what I thought was most interesting. The study could help explain why Europe and the West, that means the United States, countries like the United States, has experienced a decline in churches and church attendance, while churches in Asia and Africa have experienced the greatest growth.
When was that written?
It was last year. And that's interesting because this study said last year, but Martin Luther talked about it in his time.
Yes, he did.
Martin Luther talked about, he called it the rainfall effect. And he talked that the gospel spreads like a rainfall. And he says that when one part of the land becomes so saturated that people get comfortable in it, the gospel continues moving on. And if you think about it, right now in parts of Europe, they've turned churches into fast food restaurants and skate parks, right? And they no longer value it. Well, we have been so blessed in the United States, and it's such a good blessing that we get to come to church, and we get to do this thing called the divine service, right? And, excuse me, Dale, go back to my office. No, go back to my office. We get this thing where we get to do divine service, and we get to worship freely. But one of the things that happens other places is they don't. It's restricted. And how that comes to play for us is this. On a Sunday morning, we wake up and we say, well, would I rather sleep in? Would I rather watch football? Or would I rather go to divine service? In places like China, if you remember when Professor Smith was here, he said they would all cram into this tiny little apartment under the COVID laws where they could be thrown in jail. And they would baptize each other in kitchen sinks because it was so important to hear the words of Jesus, right? And that's the difference, right? That it's just, it's same thing. Thoughts? All right. Let's go on. Sorry, that was Dale sneaking in. He was coming to tell us that he needed his movie changed. So, all right. Let's move on to the next one. Hosea foretells the end of the northern kingdom, when people will have no king. The people will be given what they want. We have no king, for we do not fear the Lord. What could he do for us? Their words harken back to the days when Israel rejected God's kingship in favor of being ruled by human kings. And while God did establish a monarchy for them through the line of David, it proved to be woefully inadequate. By means of this long, unsuccessful history, God will eventually restore the hearts of his people to acknowledge his rightful kingship over them. Israel's growing despair with human kingship is evident in Hosea chapter 10. All right, so here we go. Let's talk about the bits of despair that we see. Now, if you have your Bibles open, it's kind of helpful. But if you take a look at Hosea chapter 10, verses 4 through verse 9, you're going to see that the people are kind of inundated with despair here, right? They are told that things are kind of getting bad, that God is done. My mother would have said, sir, you're out of time. There are no more second chances. Do you see anything there that kind of builds up?
Give me the wrong page.
All right, well, let's look at the first one. The first one is, I think you deleted one of my slides.
Okay.
I know it's only show part of it.
So the first one was, go back.
It speak the empty words.
Yeah, there you go. They speak empty words was the first one that should have been there, but magically got deleted somehow. So speak empty words. Yeah, they were speaking empty words, and these empty words that are magically erased here were
They're very empty.
are very empty words. So these empty words are a reference to the fact that the people were giving empty words and empty oaths, and that they had taken the Lord's or the court systems and things like that, and they were bringing false accusations and lawsuits against each other, and they were suing each other and doing all kinds of things in the court systems, and they were making their words empty. They meant nothing.
Could be also mean like misunderstandings.
It could. Yeah. It was clearly here a violation of the 8th commandment, right? Now we go to number 5, which is people will mourn over it. So what in the world does that mean? Well, if you look there, it says, up to this point, the people rejoiced and gave glory to Baal while worshiping his image. Soon, however, mourning rather than rejoicing would be heard, since the calf would soon be removed. So Assyria is coming, and they had always been placing their trust, hedging their bets with Baal. But what's Assyria going to do? They're going to tear down their altars. They're going to rip them right out of all their temples. And all of these calves, all of these Baals are going to be gone, and the people are going to wail over it. They're going to cry over it. They're going to say, but these things didn't protect us. Right? And so God say, yeah, now you're going to whimper. Because these things that you use to hedge your bets, they're not going to protect you either.
The word is despair.
Yep.
Without hope.
Yep, without hope. So God says these things are going to give you no hope.
Right.
Things are bad. You have no hope in the court
They have
systems.
nowhere to turn to.
Yep. You can't turn to your court systems because they're full of this garbage that's going on. You have no way to turn to you're not going to be able to turn to your false gods because they're going to be yanked out, and Assyria is going to tear them down, right? This one's interesting. This is also part of verse 5. It says, it's idolatrous priests. This one is hard to tell because you can't see it in English, but this is kind of interesting. This is a different word. Hosea actually uses a different word in the Hebrew. There's 2 different words for priests in Hebrew. He uses the pagan word to describe priests here, which is different. And so look at this. It says foreign word for priests, not Hebrew, is used here to emphasize that these were rogue priests who served Baal. He actually digs out a foreign word to describe them, which is very unusual. So can they turn even to the foreign priests? Can they turn to these priests to protect them? No, so they can't turn to the courts. They can't turn to the foreign gods. They can't turn to their priests that are the Baal, priests of Baal. They're all not going to be able to save them. Look at verse 6. Israel will be ashamed of its own idols. This is what Eichmann says. He says, with their nation defeated, many of their people languish in exile. Their king will be gone. Their Canaanite gods shown to be powerless nothings. Their impoverished land going to ruin. Their people dying out. How can the Israelites face the future without anything in their hearts but despair? So they're going to be ashamed of even the things that they once prized.
They had gone over to the false gods, pagan gods, and actually identified with them.
Yeah.
And therefore, it never occurred to them to go back to God.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you know anything about the way that the ancient ways work, when a foreign country would come in and defeat a local country like this, one of the things that they would do is they would destroy all the temples, or they would rip out the gods like this, and they would do that to show that our God is stronger than your God. The point was, see, we've completely decimated you. Not even your God can save you. And so the fact that these, when God says, fine, I give you completely over to these idols now, what he's doing is he's saying, now, you want these gods? Here, have them. They're not going to save you either. And so when the Assyrians come and they turn to these false gods and say, save us, save us, save us, and these ones don't work, now they're going to be in fine shape, right? Now they're going to be in real bad straits. Okay, verse 8. They will say to the mountains, and this one's, listen to this, cover us, and to the hills fall on us. People facing divine judgment will actually ask to be buried by a mountain rather than to the full fury of God's wrath. They would rather have a mountain fall on them than to face God. That's pretty rough, isn't it? And so there's not a lot of hope there. Like Tim said, it's void of all hope. Then question number 6. God is going to discipline his wayward people using other nations to do so. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, right? What does that reveal about how God works in this world? That he's going to use these horrible Assyrians to come in. What do you guys think?
Feels like they're being punished twice, made them more guilty.
Okay. Does that mean God orchestrated this? Does that mean God created the Assyrians for that purpose? God made them evil to do this?
He didn't make them evil, but he used them.
Oh, that's an interesting way to explain that. So can you explain more on that?
Well, God is in control of everything, and good or evil, and everything is just a tool of the Lord. And basically all he did is use Assyria to do his work for him.
There you go. Some people get confused here. Some people will say God, this is a contradiction in the Bible. God created evil, right? God did not create the evil here.
No.
God took what was already evil and said, I can use even that for good, right? And so God used what was already evil and said, I will use this to the benefit of my people. And so this is a good way of explaining it. There is an important distinction to be made between God controlling evil and God creating evil. Think about it this way. Lucifer came and said, I want to do this to Job, right? But God said yes or no, right? God was the one controlling it. God said, I will be in control here. So that's that. God is not the author of sin, but he can use sinful men to achieve his or attain his objective. In Romans 8:28, for those who love God above all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. All things includes both good and bad things. God can use struggles, heartaches, and tragedies in ways to bring about his glory and our good. Such events, even though we don't understand the reason for them, are part of his perfect and divine plan. If God could not control evil, he would not be God. His sovereignty demands that he be in control of everything, even dreaded nations such as Babylon. So he controlled these things. They existed. Their human natures made them evil, right? Since the time of Adam and Eve falling, their depraved natures turned them that way. God just used them in the way that he could by controlling them for the good of the people he loved. All right, question number 7. Israel is fixated on fertility idol. So Hosea addresses them with an agrarian images. The image of a trained calf is another allusion to Israel's beginnings. The Lord spared his people the yoke they love to thresh in the field. See Deuteronomy verse 25. That's up on here on the screen. Anybody want to read that really long passage?
You are not to muzzle an ox when it is threshing.
All right, okay. That freedom was abused. So the people will now have to be harnessed. What will the result if God's people submit to the yoke of his discipline? So what's the result if people just listen to God's discipline? First of all, what's the difference between discipline and punishment? You hear that you should...
Discipline sets boundaries,
Okay.
and punishment says, you got outside the boundaries, so now I'm going to whip you
Okay.
or something. I'm going to do something to you.
You're exactly right. Here's a fun one for you. Ready? The disciples were being disciplined. That's actually where that word comes from.
Yeah.
Right? When you discipline somebody, you teach them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the word disciple means. They were being taught. So when you discipline somebody, you are teaching them in the way. When you punish somebody, you are punishing them. You are for a behavior, right? You are what's a way to explain that? You are
You're getting the results of your actions.
there. You go. So there's a difference. There's an actual intent difference, right? One is specific loving, and one is got a negative connotation to it. Discipline is always loving. Punishment can have a negative intent to it. All right. So keep that in mind, that when we talk about the discipline of the Lord, when we see his discipline, it is always loving. There is never any negative connotation to the Lord's discipline in our life. The Lord disciplines those who he loves. So then what does that mean? What will the result of God's people be if they submit to the yoke of his discipline? If they listen to him?
It will be freed from his punishment.
There you go. Jesus says this. Look at this. We'll get there. Henceforth, we will expect the people to shoulder the full weight of the covenant, even though they chafe under his yoke and toil and to produce the fruit that he desires. All right, so that's another way of saying what Jesus says. Look at this. Anybody want to read the words of Jesus?
Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
There it is. Right? So he's saying, learn from my ways, and then you'll have an easy yoke. All right. Question number 8. The law of sowing and reaping is clear in Hosea 10. Because Israel has shown iniquity, she will reap injustice. By trusting in man rather than God, Israel has come to believe lies rather than truth. Think of a time when you may have trusted your own way rather than the Lord. What did you reap as a result? When you trust in your own way. You don't have to be specific. Anytime you trust in your own way rather than the Lord.
Panic.
Panic. I like that. Stupidity, struggle. I noticed something about somewhere we had 3 words. None of them are words that we like to feel in our life, right? Yeah. And so that's a good way to think about that. But anytime you feel that way, it's never something you want to feel. Okay? So the second part of that question is, how would you define, then, fruit of lies?
Betrayal.
betrayal. Well, these are the fruits of the flesh. Fruits of the flesh are obvious according to Paul. Sexual immorality, impurity, complete lack of restraint, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, discord, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambition, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, orgies, and things similar to these. Now, if you look at that list, and you think about that list as the fruit of our flesh, I think you can say that our fruit of our lives all land us in these fruits of flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And the fruits of the flesh for the people of Israel landed them here. Go ahead. This resulted in the false worship of Baal, general lawlessness, and the reliance on human resources for national security. Right? So if you remember, they went to the false gods. They couldn't trust their own courts because of the empty words. And what did they do? They turned to they went to all those other countries, and they gave up all the things that God had given them because they said, we can't trust God. We got to trust all these foreign nations to protect us rather than God. And that was their problem, wasn't it?
Those words are very real to this day.
Yeah.
I mean,
Did they have much choice but to submit to the conquering force? I don't know.
Well, yeah. So remember, if you look back when they first started, when they first came into the Promised Land, the only time they failed was when they failed to trust the Lord. Right? Like, remember, they would continue to conquer all of these massive armies unless they failed to listen to the Lord. Whenever they would do something that the Lord said, don't do that, that's when they would fail. For example, when Achan stole,
Mm-hmm.
that's when they failed. As soon as they listened, they won, right? But every time they failed to do what the Lord said, that's when they failed. And so here, God said, trust me. And they said, we can't trust you. So they went to Egypt, and they went to all these foreign governments, and they said, you need to protect us. And those foreign governments said, well, you need to give us all your grain.
Yeah.
And so what they do? Okay, that sounds like a deal to me. Right? And so, again, it's just a matter of not trusting God. All right, next one. We're going to have to move on to the last section. This is Hosea, chapter 11, verses 1 through 11. This is a longer little section, but it's only got 2 questions attached to it. Anybody want to read that one?
When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. The more I called to them, the more they went away from me. They kept sacrificing to the Baals and burning incense to idols. Yet I was the one who taught Ephraim to walk, and I took him in my arms, but they did not realize that it was who healed them. I drew them with cords suitable for a man, with ropes of love. For them I became like someone who lifts a yoke off their neck, and I bent down to feed them. They will not return to the land of Egypt. Instead, and Assyrian will be their king, because they refuse to repent. The sword will slash against their cities. It will destroy the bars of their gates. It will devour them because of their plans. My people are determined to turn away from me. Do they call him the Most High? He certainly will not exalt them. How can I give you up, Ephraim? And how can I hand you over, Israel? How can I make you like Admah? And how can I treat you like Zeboim, whatever it is? My heart is changed inside me. All my compassion is stirred up. I will not carry out my burning anger. I will not destroy Ephraim again, because I'm in God and not man, the Holy One among you. I will not enter a city. They will follow the Lord. He will roar like a lion. Yes, he will roar and his children will come trembling from the west, and they will come trembling like a bird from Egypt, like a dove from the land of Israel. I will settle them in their houses, and declares the Lord.
So we've got a couple things to look at here. It says, when Israel was a child, I loved him. The Lord is not only their king and husband, he is also their father, and has been since forming them as his own special people. You can see that in Exodus 4. You will then say to Pharaoh, the Lord says, Israel is my son, my firstborn. And I have said to you, let my son go to serve me. But you have refused to let him go. Watch out. I will kill your son, your firstborn. All right? Go back one, Andrea. He aches over them with a father's concern for a wayward, rebellious child. Now, does that remind you of a story by chance? What story does that remind you of? Father aching over
he comes back and willing to eat the slop that the pigs eat.
A prodigal son. Let's watch that one.
The Gospel of Luke opened with the birth of Jesus.
Then Luke showed us how Jesus was Israel's Messiah, announcing the good news of God's kingdom to the poor, and how he was God's true prophet to Israel.
In this next section, Jesus sets out with his disciples on a long road trip to Jerusalem, where they'll join thousands of Israelites to celebrate the ancient feast of Passover.
Now, Luke wants this road trip from the mountain to Jerusalem to remind you of ancient Israel's long road trip. With Moses, they went from Mount Sinai to the Promised Land. And then later, King David established Jerusalem as their capital. And so here, Luke is portraying Jesus as a new Moses who's renewing Israel's covenant with God, and as a new David. He's gathering the people together to live under his rule.
As Jesus leaves, he sends out a wave of his followers ahead of him to prepare each new place for his visit.
Then Jesus would arrive, announcing the good news of God's kingdom, and he would call people to follow him and join this new thing God was doing in Israel.
There are many of his teachings and parables in this section, specifically about how following Jesus will force you to totally rethink your money, how you resolve conflict, and how you treat the poor.
In every town, Jesus would create communities of people who were learning to live in a totally new way, so that greed would be transformed into generosity and anger into forgiveness. And in these Jesus communities, all outsiders are welcome.
Yeah, good news for the poor. That's one of Luke's main themes.
Yeah, you'll find it all over this section. The marginalized people that he heals, the shamed sex workers he reaches out to, the tax collectors he includes. This is Jesus's kingdom crew.
And Israel's religious leaders watch and start to criticize him. If he really is God's prophet, why is he welcoming sinners and eating with them?
Yeah, this section reads like the Battle of the Banquets. So Jesus throws these dinner parties as a symbol of how God's kingdom is here for the sick and the poor, people who could never pay him back.
Jesus also attends banquets with Israel's religious leaders.
Yeah, and he lays into them for becoming an arrogant, exclusive social club.
But they don't get it, and so he tells them a famous parable that goes like this.
There was a father who had 2 sons.
The older son is trustworthy and honors his father.
And the younger son, he's a mess. He rebels and cashes in his inheritance to travel far away and blow it all on partying and being stupid.
And then there's a famine in the land, and he runs out of money. So he has to scrape by taking care of somebody's pigs. And he's so hungry he wants to eat the pig slop, at which point it occurs to him, if I'm going to be a farmhand, I might as well go home and work for my dad. At least I won't be eating pig food. So he treks back home, rehearsing his apology.
Now, the father is certain that his son did not survive the famine. But then, one day, he sees someone walking down the road. It's his son. He's not dead. And so the father runs to him and embraces his son, kissing him all over.
The son starts his speech. Dad, I don't deserve to be your son. Maybe I could come and work for you.
But before he can finish, the father calls his servants to go get the nicest robe, new sandals, a fancy ring for his son. They're to prepare the best food for a banquet. It is time to celebrate.
Now later that day, the older brother arrives from a long day working in the field to discover his long-lost loser brother has come home. And they're celebrating?
And he gets angry. And think about it. He's been been faithful to his father all of these years. He never got a party like this. And then this disgrace of a family member comes home, and they're going to celebrate him? It's disgusting. He refuses to join the banquet.
So the father finds the older brother outside, and he says,
Son, you are already in our family. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate your brother because he was lost. And now he's found. He was dead, but now he's alive.
Jesus wants the religious leaders to see the outsiders the way God sees them, as sons and daughters that are being reclaimed from death.
Jesus' kingdom community was wide open to anybody. The only entry requirement is to humble yourself and recognize your need for God's mercy. And so the religious leaders' rejection of Jesus and his crew is actually a rejection of the God of Israel.
The leaders don't like all this, and so as Jesus' road trip comes to an end, the conflict is at a boiling point.
Yeah, he's going to ride towards Jerusalem for Passover as they plot to take his life. And that's what the next section of Luke is all about.
All right. So then we go back a little bit. And then, great. Yeah. Jesus' parable of the prodigal son. How does that parable reveal God's intentions towards Israel and the discipline they're about to undergo? And then we've also got the Hebrews passage. All right. Anybody want to tell me, how does this parable help us with how God wants this to be, how he wants to see Israel?
He has not totally given up. He has not totally turned his back on them.
He has not totally turned his back. And actually, he still hasn't, right? I mean, even to this day, they're gone, right? And we say the lost tribes of Israel, but are they really lost? Even to this day.
They all have been bought.
They've all been bought. Every time to, even this day, people that come to know Jesus, that are baptized and things like that, and know Jesus through his son, or know God through his son, become part of this rich family that we have, right? And so we can't say, well, you're part of the family of Abraham and we can trace your genealogy that way. But God still calls out to them, doesn't he? When he sent his son, he purchased the tribes. He purchased everyone, right? That's universal reconciliation. And so it's not as they had imagined it once, that just because you are of this family, you get to go to heaven. But it certainly is the fact that Jesus purchased them back. All right, let's go to question number 10. By the means of the toddler image, in verses 11, or chapter 11, verses 1 through 4, Hosea recounts how God cared for Israel when the people were small and weak. What word pictures does the prophet use to describe God's care in this passage? What do those pictures convey? So if you got a chance, let's go back and maybe we can look at verses 1 through 4. Can we do that? There you go. When I was a child, I loved him. And out of Egypt, I called my son. The more I called to them, the more they went away from me. They kept sacrificing to Baals and burning incense to idols. Yet I was the one who taught Ephraim to walk. I took them in my arms, but they did not realize that it was I who healed them. I drew them with the cord suitable for man, with the ropes of love. For them I became like someone who lifts up the yoke of their neck, and I bent down to feed them.
Bent down.
Ooh. That's a picture of you don't often think of God doing, right? When you think about God in that way, that's kind of crazy language, isn't it? To think of God in these kinds of ways. Think of him actually as our Father. Eichmann has this beautiful passage. Look at this. In tender language of a father, remembering his son's childhood, the Lord reflects on how he loved his people during his young years as a nation. The Lord's remembrance of his love For their youthful Israel is now mixed with a bitter memory of Israel's Baal worship in Canaan. And you think about your children, and you remember your children, and you can think about how, oh, when they're little, but then you got, oh, you know, there may be those things that they also did. And that's what the Lord is doing. And he's remembering those moments as well. And so he's still their father. And he's using those pictures to get us to realize he still loves them. He still cares for them. He still wants them to succeed, right? And I like that he bent down to them. You don't think about God doing that, right? But our God did.
He bent down when he gave us his son.
Absolutely. God incarnate. Anything else? Let us end with prayer. Dearest Lord, we pray that as our lives continually fall short, you would always remind us that our hope does not rely on us, but on Jesus. Help our unbelief and turn it to faith. Amen. Well, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday as we continue with our next lesson in the life of Jacob. We'll see you then.
The life of Jacob.